I'll just go in and give this 5 more seconds while I wait for Twitch and YouTube to be ready. Okay, I'm assuming that it's going to be like usual where Twitch will just take a minute to... Yeah, there we go, it caught up. Nice. What is up in the Ubox, guys? This is TopHat Productions 115 coming at you with yet another short video. This time, I'm going to be doing a short one where I just talk about the major changes in server setup that I talked about last time. Last time I mentioned that a lot of hardware acquisitions and changes were made to the server project and that overall things were starting to ramp up. Well, here's what I meant by that. So I'm just going to go on and pretty much just go down this list. This video is going to be really short. I'm not going to really be playing with ESXi in this video because this video is meant to more so just talk about the changes that have been made. And instead of, well, going into the server tonight, what I'll do is I'll talk you through the changes in paper, and then from there in the next stream that I do, or maybe in the stream afterward, you'll get to see the results of the changes. Some of this hardware is still coming in the mail, and some of it is already here. So I'll just go ahead and start explaining that now. We'll start with the online interactions part. The VMware Project Mirror almost got sunset, as I mentioned last time. It happened due to like a snarky comment that someone made, but the thing is though that I didn't recognize that it was them being snarky at the time. A little miscommunication, and I decided to pause the VMware Mirror temporarily that day to avoid any trouble because I just didn't really want to play with fire at that point. The VMware community had already been pretty good to me at that, just all the way up to that point, and I didn't really want to sour things, so I decided to pause that mirror until further notice, until it was actually addressed, and lo and behold, it was addressed by a VMware community moderator or admin. They actually took care of the snarky comment, and as such, the VMware Project Mirror has been reopened, and it has been that way for over a week now. So firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the VMware admins publicly, and secondly, I'd just like to say that the VMware Mirror, just like all the other project mirrors, should be up to date now with the new hardware details as usual, because every time that I make a hardware acquisition like the ones mentioned in this list, they get updated. If I buy a new graphics card, the project mirror gets updated, and as such, you could see changes come in maybe every few days, possibly every few hours if I make a quick decision at the last minute. But that's all for that one. So just happy that the VMware community has been there. Speaking of VMware community, I'll be talking about the external hard drive array in just a few moments as well, once we go further down this list. But I'm first going to talk about server configuration and testing. I got more of the DNS records working. In fact, I got pretty much all of them working at this point. And if I remember correctly, I even got a few DNS records set up for in advance. I have vCenter working. I have, I'll just go through the entire list of ILO as an integrated lights out controller, ILO 3 working with a fully qualified domain name. I have ESXi and vCenter working with their own fully qualified domain names. I think ESXi doesn't really use a fully qualified domain name, it just uses a host name with a few other modifications added on top. But vCenter and ILO3 actually use fully qualified domain names. Active Directory also uses a fully qualified domain name, and I actually changed that one like last night so that it would actually fit the naming scheme that I have set up, where it's like subdomain.txp-network dot whatever the suffix would be, or whatever the end part would be, like .com or .org, .net, whatever. But I actually managed to rein in everything and get everything nice and uniform so that now everything will actually match up and it'll look better when I actually look at different services and stuff like that over the network. Aside from that, yeah, I already talked about fully qualified domain names. I actually made the fully qualified domain name match the one that I'm using for external facing services, so that should definitely help out with unifying things a little bit more. But most of the things I'm mentioning now, you guys will only see the front end of in a few months after everything is set up and ready. That would include like front facing websites and stuff like that, and VPN. Let me go to the next item. vCenter Server Appliance takes forever to ready up. Yeah, that thing takes forever. Here's what happens. First, the thing initializes itself, right? starts up all the services and everything that it needs, and then from there it'll show like a nice little screen saying go to this IP address to manage it. Well, the thing is, even though it says go to this IP address to manage it, even after that it's not ready. It'll give a 503 server-side error of some sort, and what's happening is it's still technically starting up and doing other things, like the web UI isn't even ready after it says to go to the IP address. Not a complaint, but more so like just saying, if you do use vCenter for your setup, or if you decide to use vCenter server appliance in the future, just beware. And this is only applying to the vCenter appliance because that's the only one that I have experience with. I don't have experience with the Windows Server version of vCenter where it works like in a Windows Server VM. I have experience with the Linux vCenter server appliance, vCenter server appliance. And the one I'm talking about is that Linux appliance, the Photon Appliance. That one, what it'll do, as I said, is it'll initialize itself, and once it gets to like a certain point, it'll show like a screen that says go to this IP address or this hostname to manage it. Don't go there yet, because even after it says go to this one to manage, it might not be ready yet. I would give it like another 5 or 10 minutes depending on your setup, because otherwise it'll just give you a 503 error and it won't really be ready for you to manage anything from it yet. And during that time you can probably do other things. So take advantage of that time and let it start up all the way, because waiting for it and just twiddling your thumbs is not exactly the most efficient way of using your time. As such, I've actually taken time during my setup process to just find efficient ways of using that time waiting for it to start up, which is pretty funny. I mean, I'm putting a lot of emphasis on it, but I'm only putting emphasis on it because of the fact that it takes long enough to start up, where there are other things that a server admin could possibly be doing while waiting for it to start up. Not to say that there isn't something wrong, but I don't know if there is, and to be quite honest, if you have to wait, there could be other things that you could be doing, which is something that I learned after the first few times. In addition to this, because of the vCenter appliance, I also haven't been able to use maintenance mode again, which is pretty interesting because I used to use maintenance mode every time that I shut down the server. But now what I do instead is I go through, turn off all the VMs like I usually do, but Windows Server and vCenter get turned off last because they're kind of holding up some of the more important infrastructure, NTP, DNS, AD as an Active Directory, and also just managing ESXi server and all of that. So the last 2 VMs I go down are the most important ones, because turning those off first would cause some pretty interesting issues. I'm not really going to go into full details about it, but long story short, if you're managing ESXi through vCenter, the last thing you want to turn off before turning off the server is vCenter. And the first thing you want to turn on when turning on the server is vCenter. But also keep in mind that if you're running a server like that, especially 24/7, you'll want to minimize any downtime that you have, and you probably don't really want to be shutting down your server much to begin with. So if you have to shut down the server, know what things to turn off when, and don't screw yourself over. And last but not least, from just my experience, I would say don't use maintenance mode, because I've had some issues. Well, actually, I can't say that. In my case, I can't use maintenance mode, but if you know how to properly use maintenance mode, go on and use it. But from what I've dealt with recently, turning on maintenance mode actually caused issues where I was forced to actually go into the server via SSH, turn off maintenance mode from the command line, and then from there shut down the server properly. So with that, I'm just going to go on and leave that point there, because I'm sure that there are other experts out there who can probably handle that type of stuff better than I can. But if you're just starting out, that is really all I can say at this point. Let me see. Oh yeah, there are certain UI appliances or applications that work really well in Internet Explorer and Internet Explorer only, depending on the version that you're using. For instance, ILO3. Everything works in Internet Explorer, and that would include the remote console as well. If you try to use a remote console in Chrome or any Chromium-based browser or other browsers, it's not guaranteed to work. You can try IE Tab and I think it's the one-click plugin, right? Chrome one-click, but it's not quite guaranteed to work. I haven't been able to get that working yet, but I know that there are other people who have gotten it working. So as such, I'm not going to say that they don't work. I'm just going to say that in my case, I wasn't able to get them working. So what I suggest doing, if you can, is to either go for a version of ESXi, not ESXi, either go for a server that has a newer version of ILO, like ILO 4 or higher. I think those actually include HTML5 UI, and they actually, most of their features will work outside of Internet Explorer, I think. But don't quote me on that. I think ILO 4 as an Internet Light, my bad, I'm sorry, Integrated Lights Out Controller 4. I think ILO 4 should work pretty well outside of Internet Explorer, but ILO 3, on the other hand, has certain elements that just don't work well or don't work at all outside of Internet Explorer without some hacking around and without some external modifications or plugins in your browser. So as such, tread carefully, and if you don't want to deal with that at all, make sure to get a server that has a newer version of ILO or other integrated management solutions built in, so you don't have to use an outdated browser like Internet Explorer. Here are the two major appliances, or should I say applications, that have given me that type of trouble. First, as I've said like 5 times now, ILO 3. Integrated Lights Out Controller 3 has certain features that don't work really well outside of IE. vCenter Server Appliance also has a Flex version. Long story short, it's an Adobe Flash based version, and the Flex version has certain features and capabilities that have not made it to the HTML UI version as of yet, at least for version 6.7. If I remember correctly, managing virtual Flash resources, yeah, I think that's limited to Flex, but I'm not sure. The last I checked, it is limited to the Flex or the Flash version of the vCenter UI. And as such, well, in that case, I don't really know what you would do, because even though I've gotten the Adobe Flash version of it working in Chrome and Chromium-based browsers before, it didn't quite work consistently. Like, for example, I tell Chrome to actually leave Flash enabled for just this website, this IP address, or this domain, but then it would go back to not working the next time. So it's kind of just been working on and off for me. So as such, if you're going to be forced to work with an older version of some of these tools, just be mindful, you might have to install Internet Explorer, which kind of sucks. Or if you can get away with IE tab and one-click in Chrome or other browsers, I would suggest going that route instead, so you don't have to use an outdated browser. But whatever you do, just keep that in mind with whatever tools that you choose to manage your server with and whatever server hardware that you choose. These are the types of things that you really want to think about before picking a server. In my case, the consequences weren't too bad. I just have to install Internet Explorer because for some reason Chrome just isn't acting right for me. But I can also use Internet Explorer from a sandbox or a VM to to keep it safe. But for those of you out there who don't want to go through that trouble of possibly having to box up Internet Explorer and make sure it doesn't, because Internet Explorer is somewhat of a security vulnerability at this point, and if I remember correctly, yes, Microsoft suggests moving on to Edge. So if you don't want to go through that issue of using Internet Explorer, just be mindful of the tools that you're going to be using. In my case, I'm okay with making a slight compromise because I know how to mitigate it. For other people who don't want to make that compromise, know what you're doing in advance, choose the hardware, choose the tools, and everything well in advance. With that, I'm going to move on to the next point because I think I've harped on that enough. I go through these things so that you don't have to. DNS, yeah. As I already mentioned, DNS and NTP seem to be working just fine. NTP stands for Network Time Protocol. I have an NTP server running on the server. And I also added the 1066 gig to the server for noise testing. No complaints so far. The only test after that will be to actually fire up a Windows 10 VM and to add the 1060 to the VM to see if the fans ramp up anymore. But with that out of the way, I'm now going to start talking about hardware purchases. Firstly, a few weeks ago, I purchased an extra 64 gigs of RAM for the server, so the server is now sitting at 128 gigs. Nice. I did that partially because of the fact that vCenter actually pulled, I think, well, not pulled, it reserves for itself like 10 or 12 gigs of RAM by default. And I realized that if it was pulling that much RAM for itself by default, I would have to change some of the plans for my other VMs. Now, I could have changed the RAM allocation for vCenter, but at the same time, I haven't really had much experience with it yet, and I also didn't know how that would affect its operation in the future. So as such, instead of playing the risky option and messing with the configuration for vCenter too much, I went on and just bought more RAM instead because I could afford to, and it was much easier. Not only that, but also now I can actually allocate somewhat more RAM to the other VMs and have some to spare in case I actually need to kind of upscale. With that said, I may look into, not modifying, but just kind of adjusting the vCenter appliance in the future, but not really. Moving on to the next point, I also bought an Intel 320 series SSD recently, 600 gigs. Now, I didn't really buy it for speed as much as I bought it for capacity. I understand that SSDs are faster than hard drives pretty much in every case, but however, this is an older SSD and therefore is not really going to be anywhere near as fast as a newer SSD. So you can see where the priority is in this case. I bought it primarily because of the fact that I wanted to have a larger virtual flash capacity than what I already have. I currently have a 500 gig SSD in there, and I wanted to pair it with another one that was slightly bigger, so I'd have just over a terabyte of virtual flash for in case I decided to, how should I say this? For in case I decide to give all the VMs more than 100 gigs of virtual flash at some point, which may or may not come in handy, since all of the VMs are currently running on, as you would so kindly put it, spinning Rust as in hard drives. Moving on to the next point, I also bought recently, as in like maybe just over 2 weeks ago, I recently bought 4 IBM StoreWise 4 terabyte hard drives. These are SAS hard drives, and I bought them primarily for capacity. These, of course, replace the 2 terabyte hard drives that were in the original plan, and therefore double the capacity of the external storage array. However, I actually, where is that link, right? I made a link for it. Yeah, a lot of these purchases were made weeks ago. I thought I put a link to it. Yeah, there we go. Right here. It's in the remaining to-do list. In the remaining to-do list, I mentioned the HBA drive array access for VMs topic. This topic right here is the one that I'm actually currently working in right now to see if I can actually get the array working. I'm going to go in and pull that up right now, because you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Right. So this is the thread, and I will post links to all of these things in the description in due time. But here is the thread. I am currently trying to implement the solution listed here. However, I've run into a small hiccup, and we'll talk about that in a later video, but long story short, it looks as though while ESXi can see the HBA card itself, it can't see the drives attached to the HBA. So that's going to be a little bit interesting. I could try taking it. Actually, yeah, I think I could. Since the drive cage is externally powered, what I could do, and it's actually externally powered by SATA power connectors, which is quite convenient because almost every computer nowadays comes with SATA power connectors. So what I could do is try hooking up the drive array to my current workstation and initializing the drives to GPT here on the workstation, and then from there putting them back. Yeah, I could try initializing the drives on a different computer and then putting them back on the server. I'm also having a similar issue with the new SSD that just didn't show up in ESXi or vCenter, but I'm pretty sure I can fix that by just initializing them on a different computer, and then from there it'll be seen on the server itself. Now, here's the thing about the SSD though. The SSD is actually seen by the internal storage controller for the server. I can't remember what the name of that thing is though. Storage array. You know what? I could probably pull it up. Should be a simple search away, right? DL580 G7 storage up controller. There we go. So which one am I using? Because there are multiple variants for this thing, right? Multiple different storage controllers. Okay. It's one of these P411 ones, but I can't remember which one it is. Actually, is it? Yeah, let me check here just to make sure. P411, 411, 411. Yeah, the storage controller in mine is one of the P411 Smart Array controllers, and I don't remember which variant that it is. But to be quite honest, the next time that I do an ESXi live stream, you'll probably be able to see it as the server's powering up. So I'll bring that up at some point. But long story short is, the internal storage controller on the server can actually see the SSD just fine, but ESXi and vCenter can't see it. So I'll just try initializing the SSD again, and I'll probably get the virtual flash set up pretty easily. The main issue that I'm just focusing on at this point is going to be, well, actually not main. The secondary issue that I'm going to be focusing on is going to be getting that external SAS drive array working. The main issue that I'm going to be working on is another one on this to-do list, and that is Soft Ether VPN. I'll get to that in just a few seconds. How much time have I spent blabbing? I've been blabbing for 22 minutes, and I have 3 minutes left to run through all of this. I recently, as in weeks ago, near the beginning of the month, if not the month before, bought another Solar Flare SF, you know what, you can read that. I bought another 10 gig network card because of the fact that the one I bought had the wrong size bracket. It had like a low profile half height bracket or something like that, and as a result it wasn't able to be mounted into the server because the server takes full height brackets like the ones that you'd throw into a regular PC, which is nice for a 4U server because that means I can take some of my desktop hardware and throw it in there as long as it's compatible with the server. But the NIC that I bought originally was a half height, and I wasn't able to find many full height brackets for it easily, so I just went on and bought one with a full height bracket on it, which means I can now use the NIC with the half height bracket for other things, or maybe just find a full height bracket later. Who knows? But point is, the server now officially has its 10 gig NIC installed, which pretty much moves the server closer to completion because I already know that it works in ESXi, and I've seen it in ESXi before. And if you've been paying attention in my previous ESXi live streams, you may have actually seen it on screen before, identified in the list of hardware. That you know what? I'll probably point it out next time I do an ESXi live stream. But long story short is we're getting way closer than we were before. In addition to this, I also bought an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070. That's currently in my workstation. So we now have a another GPU that could possibly end up in the server in the future. The 1066 gig is currently being tested, but sure enough, if the server, or should I say not if, but when the server is ready, and when I'm finally ready to ditch the workstation for the server, what I'll do is I'll actually move the GTX 1070 to where the GTX 1060 is right now, and the GTX 1060 will just become a spare GPU for in case the 1070 dies. For which I say, it is always good to have a spare part in case one of your parts dies. In addition to this, I recently also purchased a few Tesla K80s for raw compute, and would definitely like to use them for folding at home, Boink, and other compute tasks soon enough once I move out. The only reason why I don't put the K80 in right now is primarily because of the fact that I know that it'll be a noise and power and or heat concern, especially for my parents, and as such I'm not going to use it too much at this time. However, once I move out, yes, those K80s are going in because, yeah, I'll be using them, and the server will be probably somewhere in a basement or in a noise-isolated room where it won't be much of an issue. And on to the last part on the list, we have the Grid K520, and I am Yeah, officially over my time. This might be a 30-minute stream. Sorry, guys. But, yeah. I bought the Grid K520 recently, only like within like the last few days, I believe. But I bought the Grid K520 because of the fact that I actually figured out that the Tesla K10 is pretty much restricted to being purely a compute card like the K80. Now, in older VMware community posts, I saw that it was possible to get the K10 passed through to a VM and have it show up partially as like a Grid K1, I think. Let me see. I can probably pull it up. Right here. I remembered enough details to pull it up instantly. Or is it? Yeah, there we go. I'll just go in and let you guys read through that while I'm talking about it. But here's what the person said. I have a similar issue here and did not see this addressed, but figured I would post this thread anyway. But long story short is they had a Tesla K10. They upgraded to 6.5. I'm assuming this is ESXi 6.5, the very version that I'm using. I'm using update 3. So 6.5 U3 versus whichever version they were using in 2017. And in 2017, I'm guessing they would have either U2 or U3. After doing some research, I'm not sure if the K10 will work. K10 is Kepler, blah, 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 support driver option. But sure enough, skipping down here, when I upgrade the host from U2 to 6.5, which has a... Okay. So it says here that they're upgrading from 6.0 U2 to 6.5. So maybe this is like the first revision of 6.5. But here, it shows what appears to be the... Is that a Grid K1? Yeah. And the Grid K1 actually has a real device model. I'll just pull it up here. Tech power up. Delete the rest. Grid K1. And there you go. Now here are the specs for the Grid K1. Because it appears as though when you pass through the Tesla K10, at least in ESXi 6.5, like the first version, it seems to... Is it like passing itself through as a Grid K1? When I upgrade to the... it's almost like there are several issues here. vSphere cannot pass through the Tesla card via PCIe directly to a VM until the hypervisor has a driver, which I'm guessing is the VIB file that you would upload and install. There is not a Kepler compiled driver for vSphere of any version. The card can emulate a K1, as that's the closest driver it can find and pass through. As such, for using this for computational... So long story short is, due to how early that they were testing the K1, but there are a few questions I have about this post. But long story short, due to the fact that they didn't quite have all the drivers, I'm guessing it got passed through as a Grid K1 instead of as the full Tesla K10. And if we look at the Grid K1 and compare that to the specs of the... Let me pull it up here right now, so that I'm not just Tesla K10. Easier if I just show you it instead of talking about it. But long story short, if you look at the specs of these two, K10 versus Grid K1, GK104, GK107, this number of cores versus this number. Long story short, if you pass, well actually no, not if you do. If you pass through the card in the same fashion that this community member did with whichever version of ESXi that they used, it ended up being passed through as a Grid K1, which, if I remember correctly, has a lot less computational grunt than the full K10. So I'm guessing technically you could use that for VDI, but the thing is though, the Grid K1 is it's a weak one. If we look here, GT220. Well, no, not that. Actually, GT430. There we go. Much closer. And the long story short is, if I remember correctly, the Tesla K10 is just a compute card. I understand that can be modded into a grid K2. However, I do not have the resources to do so at this time, or the time to do so, because I'm going to be working 5 days a week soon, as in within the next 2 days. And I've already discussed that in the previous live stream. So as such, I don't really have the time or resources to mod a K10 into a K2. I would have to ship it out to someone to do that, and that would cost me extra money. And while it may be cheaper or comparable to buying the K520, the grid K520 that I bought recently, the K520 can be used for VDI as is, and I can keep the Tesla K10 as just a pure compute card for whenever I want to. But long story short, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole where it shouldn't be. While it may work in this way, in this fashion, it probably isn't meant to work like that. And if I remember correctly, yeah, he's even saying here, he or she is saying here, that it would be emulating like a low-end Kepler Quadro, which isn't really the intention that I had. I wanted for it to either be a high-end compute card or to be a decent VDI card for accelerating things such as video editing and stuff like that. And I don't know if a grid K1 would be good for those purposes. Seeing just how small the, well, not small, just seeing how should I say this, how low the specifications for it would be. And they even ask the questions here, will it even work for GPU rendering? Do I pass through? And other questions, all of which call into question the idea of using the Tesla K10 for anything but compute, which is fine because I bought it due to the fact that even if it wasn't capable of VDI, I could still mod it into that. But as it stands right now, the situation has changed, and as I said, I don't have time or resources to convert it into its grid counterpart. So I'm going to keep it as a compute card because it's still worth keeping around either way. Even though I have the Tesla K80s as well. And I'm over my time again. Darn. Time to speed up. But anyway, that's the reason why I have the grid K520. The grid K520 will work out of the box, and I'll be able to keep the K10 for in case I want to either mod one into a K2, or for in case I just want to use a lower power compute card that isn't a full power K80. I have options, and I'm better off with options than without options. Now on to the potential hardware liquidations. You've probably already seen a lot of these before, but the first line of potential hardware liquidations is a pair of E7 2870s. I may list these on, and this is referring to all the items on the list, not just the Xeons. I may list these items on eBay, or I may kind of list them on other forums and places first, and then put them on eBay later once I get rid of the ones I can. So just be on the lookout. These items may or may not be sold within the next few months. I have a pair of E7 2870s that need to be gotten rid of. I'm still deciding on the K10s. I'm actually more inclined to keep them at this point. So I'm just going to put a star next to them because I don't really know if I want to get rid of them at this point. I think I'd rather keep them. I currently have 24 gigs of, well, I'm not going to read the specs out, but yeah. I think it's 6 times 4 gigs, 24 gigs, yeah, of RAM. It's a it's not a mismatched kit, but it's a kit that doesn't match what's in the server, and I've been playing it safe with the RAM that I have in the server currently. I went and bought the majority of it kind of in bulk in one go, so it would all be a matching kit so that there wouldn't be any issues. So as such, I have 24 gigs extra of RAM that doesn't match the specs of what's currently in the server. So I'll be trying to get rid of that as well, probably maybe for like $30 at most. $1 a gigabyte is more than enough. I also have a pair of Seagate Savio SAS hard drives. They're 2.5-inch drives, and a pair of Hitachi. These are both NextApp drives, to be specific. NextApp drives, NextApp SAS drives, and they are formatted differently than normal drives. Their sector sizes, I think, are a bit larger than what most people would use in like consumer PCs and even in some servers. So as such, if you buy these, you'll need to possibly do like a low-level reformatting of them, where you'd have to actually change like the sector size or something. But I'm not going to go into detail about that. There are people who know more about that than me. I also have a 4-port HP NIC. Keep in mind that this is like well, not fully proprietary, but this is a somewhat proprietary piece of hardware where it fits in a PCIe slot, but it also has like an extra few contacts hanging off the back that kind of indicate that it's meant to go in an HP server that actually supports it. I don't know if it works in mine, but I haven't really tested it out yet, and I don't really feel like it because of the fact that I have 2 other NICs that work just fine and that aren't HP specific. It is a gigabit NIC, and it has 4 ports, so you have 4 gigabit ports if you buy it, but just make sure that you know whether or not your server is compatible before buying. I will not be helping out with compatibility searching. I'll just give the part number so you can actually look into it yourself. I also have one Hitachi. Oh, I think this one, that's an old one. Yeah, that hard drive came out of a MacBook, and I think that's like SATA 1 or SATA 2. It's a really old 2.5-inch hard drive that I was using a MacBook before I replaced it with an SSD. If you're interested in it for any reason, it's slow, old spinning rust, but if you need an old hard drive, this is maybe up your alley. Not sure. This was in like a 2006 or 2008 MacBook, just to give you an idea of how old it is. 10 years. And I also have 4 gigs of PC3 DDR3 SODIMM RAM as well that I no longer need. That was originally inside of my EliteBook before I replaced it with 2 4-gig modules instead. There. So I'm just going to hop to the to-do list now, and I've been yakking for 37 minutes, going on 40. Crap, I meant for this to be short. Remaining to-do list. 1, I have to add the remaining SSDs to the virtual flash resource pool. As I already mentioned, that's going to be done through the Flex, or should I say the Adobe Flash UI for vCenter. I also have to work on accessing the drives via the HBA adapter that's in the server. I already mentioned that as well, and I even showed the link for it and the page for it. I've already taken care of configuring fully qualified domain names for both services, and I am now in the process of setting up Soft Ether VPN. That part's a little bit tricky because I haven't figured out how to actually connect Soft Ether VPN to an Active Directory or just authentication server in general yet. I'm still working on that, still looking through the documentation, and once I have that finished, I'll be able to pretty much have that running whenever I need to. I've also added it to VPN Gate. So whenever the server's up, if you get the chance to actually test it out, go in and feel free to. But just make sure not to use it for anything bad, or I will probably take it offline. Actually, I can't even say that because I'm not reading the logs half the time. I don't look at that stuff. So you guys can use it for whatever. Just don't get in trouble, or I'll turn it off. Aside from that, HTML server's support from Active Directory is kind of nominal. You can connect it to an Active Directory, but I think you still have to actually like make the accounts first and then connect them to an Active Directory account later or something like that. I'm not sure if I remember that correctly, but it's not quite as fully integrated as other services. However, I still prefer HTML server due to other factors that I'll go into later on in time. I'll also be looking into eJabbered, but I'm not going to talk about that tonight because I'm already going over the time limit. And once I get all of this set up, because these are really just the last few things I have to do, and once I get the organizational units and everything working, well, not working, but more so, once I figure out the organization for my Active Directory, I'll then move on to setting up the Artix Linux VM. The Artix Linux VM will hopefully have another VPN option. The Strong Swan VPN service will be running on that along with Nextcloud Server, and also I'll have a copy of the server JRE running so I can actually have the Minecraft server or servers multiple running on Linux instead of Windows. In addition to that, I also would like to run my Yassi search instance on Linux instead of Windows. And I'll talk about ESXi later because I've actually been playing around with it and having it do web crawls and stuff like that, and I've been having fun with it. And it works sometimes, not all the time, in terms of finding what I need. But when it works nicely, and when it doesn't, it just shows the weak areas where I need to work on it a little bit, and where I need it to do more web crawls. But part of the reason why I got the that massive hard drive array over there is because of the fact that having it do web crawls eats a lot of storage space. So that thing probably needs a dedicated storage drive, or at least a dedicated terabyte, along with the Minecraft server, depending on how many players hop on there, and depending on how big the Word file gets. So having 4 terabyte hard drives over there to spare will really help. Which is why I want to get the HBA array working before I get that stuff set up. Because the services I just mentioned on Windows Server don't take up much space. Soft Ether VPN, HTML Server, and eJabbered, for now, they aren't really going to take up much space. And even if HTML Server does start taking up space soon, I could easily cull that off. But things like Nextcloud, for example, if I start hosting large files, that can start taking up a lot of space. The server JRE is supporting applications that will also possibly take up space. ESXi, as I mentioned, web crawls and all the information that it sucks down from different websites and stuff like that, that can take up a lot of space. I actually had a little bit of an experience recently where I had to kind of kill off a few things in the index because of the fact that it was just taking up space, and it was from websites that I didn't really want to be in the index for my instance. And as I already mentioned, with Minecraft servers, the biggest space hog is going to be the world file possibly, and the log files, or at least from what I've experienced. So with that, those two both by themselves will definitely need access to that array, that massive array that I have brought into existence. Aside from that, I also have to put together a new Minecraft mod pack sometime, codename Portals for now. I'm not really going to go into detail about what mods are in it because I want it to be a surprise when I release it in the next few weeks. Future considerations: Nextcloud add-ons. That's a must because of the fact that I've been looking through all the add-ons recently and I kind of already have an idea of what I want to add, and I have an entire list. But I'm not going to talk about that tonight because the list is super duper long, even longer than what I just went through in this one 45-minute video. And also VMware Horizon, application virtualization. Yes, I'm working on that as well. I have a license for that, and therefore we'll be utilizing that in the next few weeks once I get everything else working, because certain applications I don't really want to be installing on every single computer that I have, and I'd rather just access from the server for convenience. As such, that'll make setup of new devices much easier, and in addition to that, I can easily just add new devices to the Active Directory, and yeah, setup just becomes much easier after that. Not going to go into details, but long story short, I am slowly but surely consolidating everything to just the server instead, so that I don't have to do a whole bunch of work multiple times over on every laptop that I have, that of which I have 2 laptops, 2 tablets, I think, yeah, 2 smartphones, and yeah, long story short, deploying applications and services to everything individually is becoming a pain. So, got to start consolidating and increasing my efficiency wherever I can. With that, I'm going to go in and end the video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave a comment, or if you have said something in the chat, I shall check that now. I will check the chat immediately. Chat app, what you got for me? Open in browser. Anything? Nope, not really. I'll just go and hit the back button. Yeah. And is there anything in YouTube chat? I can actually check that right now just by checking the live stream dashboard, right? So I'll just hop into the dashboard and YouTube Studio. Yeah, I'm already live right now. Dashboard. Where is my live dashboard? Do I have time? It's not showing it right now. Go live. There we go. Currently streaming. Stream. And where is live chat? Yep. There is nothing showing here so far. So now I'm just going to go ahead and check Twitch real fast to make sure that I haven't left anyone out in Twitch. Because why not? That can be nice too. Anyone here? Welcome to the chat. And no one. So what I'll do is once this live stream ends, I'll go on and update both the title and the description for this live stream. And then from there, you'll have access to everything that I just mentioned here. And aside from that, live streams for this upcoming week may either be delayed or canceled, just depending on how the work week goes. Working 5 days a week will be starting next week. So the only day I'll have really to live stream will be on Saturday and maybe Sunday if I get lucky. Because Sunday, as I mentioned, is used as a preparation day for the next week. So either late Friday or Saturday. That's really the only time when I'm going to get to live stream. Aside from that, you guys keep it cool, and I will see you in the next stream. Peace out.